We are here with the one and only Vivek Ramaswamy. We're in Vivek's house.
I was impressed. You guys are entrepreneurial in your response. I love that.
He has a bright future ahead. Vivek Ramaswamy.
Who is Vivek Ramaswamy?
I'm a first-generation American. I've lived the full arc of the American dream, an entrepreneur who believes in building things to solve problems in the world.
My advisors told me, hey, be careful how you're saying some of this stuff, which at first was like laughable to me that I would ever be painted as anything other than friendly to Israel.
His company quickly skyrocketed in value, landing this boy in the bubble on Forbes' coveted 30 under 30 list.
This is actually about the corrupt media establishment, the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years. Was that real, or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go.
Who are some of the most biggest heavyweights you've ever sat with that you've had to negotiate deals with?
Patrick Bet-David scheduling this town hall. That was pretty.
I'll tell you somebody who is not a victim, and that is Vivek Ramaswamy.
He's running really as the first properly anti-woke president of the United States.
Well, I mean shut down the FBI.
I'll get rid of the FBI.
I would shut it down. And I'll tell you why.
Donald Trump is going to surprise a lot of people in his second term.
By picking you as VP?
I'm a big believer that we, the people, create a government that is accountable to us, not the other way around.
If you listen, they're chanting things like infitata. They don't even know what they're saying.
All right, everybody, welcome to episode number, another episode of this label. Then maybe this is 67, 68, 69.
Whatever it is, it's the most important one so far, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know. We've sat down with a lot of big people, and there's a certain dopamine rush I get when I go after big names. And I must say, right here, right now, this was the biggest dopamine rush I've gotten. We flew on a dime, we booked flights 12 hours ago? I don't know, but we're here.
I was impressed, by the way, the responsiveness, and you guys are entrepreneurial in your response. I love that. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Vivek. I appreciate that greatly. We are here with the one and only Vivek Ramaswamy, but if you're watching this, if you can please like, subscribe, and comment, would mean the world. As you can see, we're working very hard, delivering great content. Okay, not only, Vivek, were you kind enough to give us this opportunity, we're in Vivek's house. I am truly honored, really to be sitting here, and I want to say thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
And he's a huge chiller for a presidential candidate. I have to say, I'm blown away by just your disposition and
thank you. I appreciate it, guys. How old are you guys, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 27.
27?
29.
29, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, the one thing
You look about 24. So.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I don't know, feel
I was using the bathroom.
older.
I saw you got the
sauna.
The sauna.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like this, yeah. I need to be here. But I was gonna say, the one thing he always talks about, Vivek, I watch all your stuff, is authenticity. Telling the American people the truth. You have doubled down on that specific thing, which is, it's so interesting. I'm curious your thoughts. I was wondering, and there's a bunch of other things I wanted to get to, but it's in my head, so I'm gonna start right here. With all that has gone on with Donald Trump, he has obviously turned the world, forget about the Republican Party, he's turned America upside down, and I think in many ways a positive way, and some could argue obviously certain negativities to it, but I think the overwhelming aspect of it is positive. There's been a lot of chaos that's come with it, yet we're 8 years further, and people are still craving Trump's America first. What is it that they're craving, given that there has still been chaos that has ensued throughout?
So let me actually start with the objection, right? Which is this word that comes up a lot. His opponents have been using it. Nikki Haley and Joe Biden talk about chaos. Let's even just start with whether what they're talking about is even such a bad thing, right? Because chaos, most people have a negative connotation with it, and maybe not chaos, but creation, right? Creative spirit. I think it's a big part of what Donald Trump brought to Washington, D.C. the first time around. When you take a machine, what government bureaucrats like to think of as a well-oiled machine, but the machine isn't doing what it's supposed to do, what its founders created it to do. At a certain level, you have to take a hammer and break that machine. And so sometimes there's going to be broken glass on the ground. Call that chaos, call that what you will, call it creative destruction. That's what's going to be required to actually revive a broken, institutionalized federal bureaucracy. And I think that some of that bureaucracy doesn't just exist in the federal government. It exists in other parts of our culture as well. The people who run universities, the people who run major media institutions have become so ossified in their way of thinking that once in a while, every generation or so, it is more than healthy. It's required to be able to bring a jackhammer, not a chisel, but a chainsaw, and really cut the excess fat, really challenge the status quo. And so I think that's what Donald Trump did. And so some people will call that chaos. I call it a requirement of every generation. Our founding fathers, people could have said the same thing in 1776.
Right.
Oh, Thomas Jefferson is sowing chaos in the United States of America. Well, we wouldn't have the United States of America if we hadn't done it. And so I think people internally for themselves are hungry for it. But there's the inner part of people's psyche that makes them want to bend the knee to some status quo authority. And I think that the question is, which side of you is actually speaking? Because I think a lot of people have that sheep-like tendency in them. And if they're acting on their sheep-like tendencies, many of them are not going to go for Donald Trump. But if they're acting on the tendency that I think is more innate to most people, right? The authenticity, the real you of who you are, not the super ego that tells you, maybe you get from your upbringing or whatever that tells you, you're not supposed to think this way. You're not supposed to vote for Donald Trump. You're not supposed to want a little bit of chaos in the system. Then maybe they would go the more traditional direction. But I think the inner self of most people favors the creation of the new, favors the spirit of the American Revolution. I think America was founded on our essential humanity, that we are the unafraid, the explorers, that we as human beings are different from animals because we can believe in something bigger than ourselves, that we can behave in ways that make short-term personal trade-offs for the long-run betterment of a nation and of ourselves. And I think if we're able to awaken that part of our human nature, then I think it's going to manifest itself in what is a major victory that could shock the system once again this year. So that's, a lot there. But
can I piggyback off the last thing you mentioned about like kind of the principles that this country are founded on? A lot of those obviously come from John Locke, come from Judeo-Christian values of the innate human value of human life, things like that. I'm curious, we're two Orthodox Jews here, obviously. I'm very curious about your religious background. I know there's a lot of Hinduism in it. There's a lot of Christianity in it, something about your piano teacher early in life. And then you just mentioned to me earlier, you were involved in this kind of Jewish intellectual society.
We hit Wikipedia very hard.
Rock
the Wikipedia page.
And you know what? A lot of it, after you start running for president, ends up being, you realize that's a whole game into itself.
Right. And I'm sure a lot of it's not true, which is why I'm asking. But also, I saw recently you were on Schultz's podcast, who's a personal hero of mine, because I'm a stand-up comedian.
He's a good dude. Yeah.
And you mentioned that as a result of the campaign, you kind of had you had new convictions and newfound conviction for your specific religious beliefs and ideology. I'm curious, like, kind of what changed and what are those newfound convictions in terms of in a religious sense?
I would say it was not a lot that changed, but more like discovering something that was there. But sometimes, you need to sand it, you need to sort of dig in the sand a little bit and find what's buried underneath. And so I think it's a year where you're constantly pressed by, literally tens of thousands of people, I'm not even talking about social media or media. I'm talking about tens of thousands of people in the flesh asking you deeply personal questions, not just like, do you like to play tennis kind of personal questions, but like deep questions about your convictions, what moves you, why it is you would make an extraordinary and insane decision to run for president with 2 young kids at home. What does it mean to you as a family? And those kinds of questions that challenge you, you have like the rote answers that you might have prepared by way of practice because you're asking the questions. But I think I found myself at my best just for me, when I take every one of those questions, not as an opportunity to say, okay, this is the off-the-shelf answer that I'm going to pick up and deliver this time and move to the next one, but to use each of those as an opportunity to freshly answer the question directly as I felt it in that moment. That was exhausting, emotionally exhausting, but it was, but daily by the tens of thousands over the course of a year. But over the course of a year, really, like, not like a little bit, but like really sharpens and hones your convictions. So anyway, as it pertains to faith.
Right, what are those convictions, I guess?
Yeah. So, I think we could talk political, we could talk cultural, we could talk, faith. You're asking,
I was asking
from a faith perspective. So I'm Hindu. And there's many branches of Hinduism as there are of Christianity and arguably even of Judaism. My core belief is that there is one true God.
Which is not all Hindus,
each
right?
of us. Well, I think there's various strands of what they call non-dualist and dualist tradition. I think the people who are of the non-dualist tradition, which I subscribe to as well, would say that is the true Hindu belief anyway.
Understood.
And it's not incompatible with the other worldview, but different people view it differently. There's one true God. He puts each of us here for a purpose. That God resides in each of us, and that's what makes us equal. is that God resides in every single one of us.
The Bible says this.
Right.
I mean, it echoes. It really echoes in a lot of the Old Testament. There are strong echoes of that in a lot of the Hindu tradition and upbringing as well. I read my son a story last night. Actually, I'll tell you this is just random bedtime story. It kind of got pretty heavy pretty fast. He picked the book off the shelf, but it was a tale from an ancient Hindu scripture, and it was the story. And actually summarizes. I was surprised. Heavy duty stuff. My son's 4, and he was patient and listened to it. So I'll tell you
your
guys the
son.
story.
He's probably pretty ambitious. So
I don't know. He's his own person, and we're gonna. And God put him here with his own gifts, and we'll see over time what those are. But it was a story of this sage who sends his son when it comes of age to go learn in that next phase of his life for 12 years, learn the ways of the arts and learn the ways of scripture and of hunting or sport or whatever. And over those 12 years, the son then comes back and says, I know everything, Father. I've learned it all. And then the father says, oh, no. He has erred. He doesn't actually understand the true essence if he thinks he knows everything already. And so he goes through this long litany with his with teaching his son. But the analogy he used is, here's the salt and here's the water. And I'm going to put the salt in the water and mix it in. And you drink the water from the top, you drink the water from the middle, you drink the water from the bottom. It all tastes the same.
Salty.
It's everywhere. The salt is everywhere in the same way that God is everywhere within each of us. But each one of us has that true inner essence with it. In this analogy, it's like the salt that is the real, and then the water is the form in which it appears. That inner essence still resides within each of us, but it's not just you because you learned these special skills that you're any different than, your neighbor or your peer. It's that same inner essence that exists within each of us. That's the heart of my belief. Now, there's a lot that follows from that. The way you regard your fellow human beings, the way you live your life. But those are moral teachings. But the core spirituality, the core theology, is that there's one true God. He puts each of us here for a purpose. The analogy, actually, even from the story last night, was if you know the true clay, then you know everything that's made of the clay. If you know what the true gold is, you know everything that which is made of gold. So if you know the true essence of the universe, what it's all made of, then that's actually your path to knowing the universe itself.
All right, everybody, just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for this episode, CubX. CubX is an IT company that personally does my own IT. I've recommended these guys to multiple of my friends. They have come back with nothing but rave reviews. These guys have fantastic customer service. There are no hold times. You call, you get through, they fix your problem immediately, and they are truly a group of talented IT professionals. They service specifically companies of 5 employees or more. They have a special division for companies with 500 employees or more, and a additional division specifically dedicated to the healthcare field, which is an area that they particularly specialize in. If you'd like to get through to them, you can reach them at 732-444-8771. Press 2 to get through to the sales department. You can also email them at hello@cubx.com. That's hello@cubx.com. You can also check them up online at cubx.com. Again, that's cubx.com. If you're a new company that's starting out and need a great IT team, definitely reach out to these guys. Or if you're an existing company that is currently not happy with your existing IT firm, I would highly recommend this group. Thank you so much, guys. Back to the episode. I was actually very curious because I've been speaking with a lot of different politicians. I actually sat with Francis Suarez just a couple of days ago, so we were talking about this as well. You went to Harvard, Yale. Those are the big league schools, obviously Ivy League schools. Right now, the biggest thing that I've been seeing is that obviously the Ivy League schools and people coming out of there are very, very left-leaning. Obviously, it goes without saying, we've seen primarily it seems like the most conservative people are the people that are older. The younger generation coming out of all these schools are more on the left. What is our government going, the backing for Israel specifically, if we're going to get into that topic, but it's part of it, at the end of the day, that it seems that the people in government who all really come from all the Ivy League schools in general are still what seems like the people that have more conservative values, and what I would say have their heads on a little bit more straight. Mm-hmm. But what is our government going to look like in 20 to 30 years if the people that come out of Ivy League schools are the ones that eventually take government for the most part?
Or other institutions,
Yeah, and it seems like those people don't like what America was founded on, or at least somewhat.
So I have a theory on this. Which is that it actually relates to what we were just talking about. And I've been to a lot of college campuses over the course of the last year. I don't think that they're actually progressive, left, or anti-American. I think they're mostly lost, actually. Hungry for direction and purpose. And in the absence of the things that used to ground that sense of identity and purpose, they're latching on to new superficial identities. I'll give you an example even related to the recent anti-Semitic wave we've seen across different college campuses, including places like my alma mater, including even places like Harvard and Penn.
Right.
Some of these protests, it's a small point, but there's a lot to this small point. If you listen, they're chanting things like intifada right after intifada.
Yeah.
But actually, if you listen really carefully, they're chanting intifada. That's my point.
I thought you made.
No.
Okay.
I'm saying literally they're chanting intifada.
See, they don't even know what it is.
They don't even know what
they
they're
have no clue.
saying. Like that's my whole point. And so intifada is the Arab word for uprising, which many people have extrapolated including maybe the elimination of Israel. But they don't know what they're saying. They just heard a word that they are literally not even saying in the correct way. They're saying intifada. And so let's just like examine that for a second. One thing could be just these are left-leaning people with like hard convictions. What would that look like? Maybe they've studied the historical biographies of the founders of Israel and the people who were the Palestinians and understand that history that goes back hundreds and then thousands of years and have come down with conviction on the side that there has to be a, two-state solution or whatever. And then there's the other option where they have no idea what a two-state solution is.
Right.
You could say from the river to the sea, you have no idea which river or which sea. You mean to be chanting intifada, and you are actually chanting infitada. That I think is actually
Sounds
closer.
like a Spanish burrito or something.
It really is, like a mediocre one. But I think that's closer to the mark. And so I think it really matters though to get to the bottom of it.
Why is that though? Why is there less fulfillment and
what used to fill that void?
yeah,
I guess
exactly.
Yeah, well, I think what used to fill that so I think there's two things. One is what used to fill that void, and another is modern insults that have created that vacuum and made it even worse. What used to fill that void was the traditional things that have grounded all of us all along, family. The idea that there is such a thing as a mother and a father, and that a child, not to say that if you grew up in a single-parent household, you can't achieve meaning, but all else equal, that still grounds your identity, and the two-parent household is the foundation for a great society. That you believe in God, that we are one nation under God, that I'm a citizen of this nation, the United States of America, not some nebulous citizen somewhere else, that I work hard to create something in the world, that I'm proud of my achievements instead of hiding them. So achievements, self-worth, hard work, family, patriotism, we could think about even belief in God. These are the things that used to ground our sense of identity and confidence. And so if we have a culture that erodes the things that ground us, people become desperate. Literally desperate to latch on to whatever other alternative identity they can use to fill that hole. Now, what are the insults that have made it worse is things like modern social media.
Yeah.
Social media algorithms are built to prey on those insecurities. So precisely over the period where we kind of begin to have that vacuum in our heart. I mean, social media algorithms, the genius of them isn't the technology, it's the insight about human psychology. To say that here's an insecurity that I can pick at. And I can get a window into your soul deeper than you have into your own.
Yeah.
That was the premise so Mark Zuckerberg founded Facebook when I was a freshman. He was a sophomore at Harvard. The predecessor to the site.
Were you guys friends?
I didn't know him,
Okay.
no. And I haven't met him. We know a lot of people in common, but never intersected with him. But this is publicly known either way. The predecessor site to Facebook is a site that he founded while a Harvard student called Hot or Not.
Yeah.
Right? And it's what it sounds
From
like.
a social network.
Yeah, okay, fine. You guys watch this. They rip it from, that's right. They rip it from the Harvard directory, and then how quickly you click on one picture versus another was actually what was most interesting, because that gives me a window into your behaviors. Well, lucky for him, Harvard actually cracked down on that, so then he left and started his own empire, started with Facebook.
Right.
What it was built on wasn't a technological insight. It was an insight about human nature, that based on how quickly you make a decision or the kinds of decisions that you make in the micro fake online environment that I give you, I can know more about your deepest native preferences than you know about yourself. And I can use that to sell you things you otherwise wouldn't have bought, back of creating a multi-trillion-dollar industry that I think has created a competitive dynamic where the companies that do that the best are the ones that are able to actually exploit those insecurities most effectively. And so that, I think, has worsened. That's not the fire. That's the kerosene we threw on the fire. And there's other kerosene we've thrown on that fire. But the original fire, if you will, was the recession of
So how do you
faith
fix
and
that?
patriotism.
How do you fix that issue? And what's it going to look like? And if it doesn't get fixed, what's our government going to look like in 30 years?
So I think the first thing is I think government's not going to fix all of it. I think we have to, first of all, accept that. It's going to take priests and rabbis and ministers to fill the God role of it. I think it's going to take parents and you know, I mean, I'm a parent of 2 sons. I don't know if either of you have kids or
No.
you're really young, yeah. But I think it's going to take the role of parents to revive the role of grounding themselves in the family unit. But I think the role of a U.S. president, and I think government actors, but let's start with the U.S. president, so I ran for last year, is to at least fill that vacuum of national identity that we have in this country. So back to what got us started on this, when I talk about a national identity crisis, part of the role of a leader of a nation is to say, this is who we are as a nation. And I think you have other leaders, controversial ones in other parts of the world right now, from, you could think about Bukele in El Salvador, you could think about Orban in Hungary, Giorgia Meloni in Italy. You know, you could see where he is right now is maybe a little bit different, but maybe even the 1990s version of Bibi. And I think that Donald Trump brought a big element of this in 2016, and I think can in 2024, is to pride to be an American, and then go even a layer deeper. What does it mean to be an American? Just as these other leaders are asking, what does it mean to be an Italian? Or what does it mean to be a Hungarian? What does it mean to be an Israeli? What does it mean to be an American? This is one of those moments where I think the U.S. president, and I think that Donald Trump is going to be up for that job. And I think that he's going to do a good job of it. I think he started in 2016, but I think there's room to go even further to say this is what it means to be an American, to be a citizen of this nation, the United States of America, not some nebulous, vague global citizen fighting climate change somewhere nebulously fulfilling our vacuum for purpose, but to say I'm a citizen of this nation, I'm proud of it, and that means something to me.
So
that matters.
I with you so much on this, but so here's my question. When you were running for president, you were very, very clear that every decision you would have made, and I assume you see it the same way if you ever run again, if you become the vice president, every single decision is going to be made through the prism of America first.
Yeah.
Trump obviously was the one who brought that a little bit back. You doubled down on that recently. Now, my question is, it seems like a lot of people have a problem with that.
I think they do. I'm just going to grab water.
Yeah, please. A lot of people seem not to like that, and I can't understand why anyone would have a problem with wanting our country to be the best. That's a shocking thing to me. Like, we're part of this, we're part of America. Why would we not want for us to care about our citizens, specifically for the president to care about our citizens first? Why do you think that is, that people are pushing back on that? Like, what's the logic behind that? Why people would want to help others before ourselves?
Right. So you're asking me to articulate and support a view that's different than the one I have, so I want to do it fairly.
That means I'm asking a good
Because
question.
I'm mostly telling my gut reaction is say it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But let's see if we can breathe.
But you've been exposed to people, very intelligent people.
That. Yeah. So look, I think there's 2 basic premises in America First. The America First movement, as we think about it. One is we the people create a government that is accountable to us, not the other way around. And that means the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who at least run the government, not these unelected monarchical bureaucrats. That was a core element of my campaign. That's prong 1. And then prong 2 is those elected leaders who we do put there, who do they owe their moral duty to? You can only have one master, right? I think this is a concept that shows up from scripture to corporate law. You can only have ever at one time serve only one master. Who is your master when you are serving as an elected official in the United States? And I say you have one master. It is the citizenry of this nation, not any other one. I think that the other side is what you're asking for. Says that, well, but as a human being who is leading the most powerful nation in the world, right? You're not just talking about any other nation. I'm trying to give you the best argument I possibly can for a view that I don't agree with, but I'm going to try to give you the best argument I can, is that even though that might work in El Salvador or Italy or Hungary or Israel or any other country, in this country, because the United States is the global leader, and we want it to remain in a global leadership position because that's good for the United States and good for the globe, that there is a secondary set of responsibilities for U.S. elected leaders that go beyond just the relationship to its citizens, but also to that of humanity more broadly, and to the citizens of certain other nations that we have an independent obligation to as the leader of the world itself. That's the best argument I will give you for the
Granted,
other side.
granted, but obviously, and no one's necessarily saying that's not true, but that would be a secondary thing to our citizens first.
Of course, I mean, I'm a solid,
But they
solid
don't-
America first.
It's just, yeah.
Ideologue. You could even call me that on this principle. But that's the best
Out of
argument for the other
curiosity,
side.
how would you? Okay, so obviously we're Jewish, we're Orthodox. Goes without saying Israel. How would you say that plays out when it comes to an ally? Obviously, Israel is America's definitely Israel's closest ally. You know, some would say that Israel's America's closest ally. How would you say that would play out?
Israel's definitely America's closest ally in the Middle East,
right?
And arguably America's closest ally,
right? So how would you say that would play out? Obviously, with regards to aid with Israel, and I've heard you say obviously that you're all in favor of diplomatically. You know, to pinpoint the question more, you've said that you're very much in favor of diplomatically supporting Israel. If Israel could get off American aid, you would be in favor of that if that's possible.
Well, I would just say intellectually, let's just sort of break this down. Aid to Israel, even, right?
Yeah.
And it is probably, I think one of the things I was a first-time politician, ran for office, learned a ton over the last year. And one of the things I learned is that A, how you verbalize things, you got to be precise with respect to what your actual beliefs are. B, even if you are precise, there's still a distortion engine that doesn't care how precise you really
I have
were.
such a great question about that too.
And this was one of the issues where I think it was before the first debate. I think I gave a speech at the Nixon Library, gave a wide range of foreign policy views, and I was ascendant in the polls, and it gave, I think, the perfect window for other Republican politicians and really their super PACs to exploit my firmly held convictions to an issue that they know matters too much to the Republican primary electorate, which at first was like laughable to me that I would ever be painted as anything other than friendly to Israel, like knowing my background and my convictions. That was like, actually, I was my advisors told me, hey, be careful how you're saying some of this stuff. I was like, that's like a laughable idea.
Right.
And then that actually managed to happen over some of the campaign. Right. So I learned a lot from it. Aid to Israel is a different concept from financial aid to Israel. Just intellectually, there are many ways you can help an ally. Financial is one of them. Just as there's many ways you can help a friend or a family member, there's many ways you can help somebody. Writing a check is one of them.
Yes.
In this window that we're in, this isn't some theoretical discussion. It matters now. Israel's in the middle of a war, okay? And I think that it's in the middle of a war that is very important to the future of Israel. Is money the rate-limiting step for Israel right now? It's not. Now, there are situations in which money could be the rate-limiting step. It's not. What is the number one rate limiter right now to Israel's success? Yeah. Diplomatic latitude.
Yeah.
So where I've been all along and where I am today is Israel has a right and an obligation to defend itself.
Does that include going into Rafah right now? Sorry to interrupt you. Like right now.
That's Israel's decision to make.
Got it.
That's where I'm at. That is Israel's decision to make. Not the UN, not the EU, and not the US, actually. Now, we complicate that if we give Israel now, say, okay, but here's just a paltry check. Oh, well, Israel doesn't really need money. I mean, now what person, what sane person isn't going to take money if you're getting it?
Right.
Sure.
Right.
But that's not the rate limiter. It's not like Israel, our national debt per person is much higher than Israel's national debt per person right now.
Right.
It's not like Israel's running out of money and running a national debt crisis. That'd be a different conversation if it were, but that's not the situation.
Right.
The situation right now is Israel is badly diplomatically constrained in what it can and cannot do. And our proposal to solve that is something largely irrelevant to that, which is to give money, but it's not even irrelevant. It's worse than irrelevant.
It harms it.
It actually is the single greatest lever that the West then has to then restrict the scope of what Israel can or cannot do to defend itself.
Well said. And it puts more pressure on the U.S. because they're the ones aiding in the war officially. So
right. And look, I think that once he who pays the piper calls the tune. That's well known internationally. It's part of human nature, part of the relationship between human beings and nations. And so that then muddies the water for the U.S. in the certain sense. If the U.S. is given the money for a specific war and not questioning those war objectives,
no culpability.
Then yes, exactly. Then some of that blood is on your hands too. So I think that the right answer for Israel and for the United States. Now I'm looking at it from an American perspective, as I believe
you should.
As I believe every American is Jewish or not. I believe that's the case. But what happens, it turns out, is if you have real allies and real friendships, when you're acting in your own self-interest, it is in the interest of the ally if it's grounded in that true essence of who you are as an individual or as a nation. And so for the United States and for Israel right now, I think the best decision is for the U.S. to provide what I've called the diplomatic Iron Dome. as a member of the UN, as a sitting voting member of the Permanent Security Council of the UN, as the leader of the free world, to stand by the firm principle that Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself, and that we stand for that to the fullest.
Is there a limit? I assume there is a limit to which that would go to. I mean,
international law is the limit.
Like, war. Like, can I ask you a question? Yeah. It does relate to Israel. I guess it might be viewed as more a question on isolationism in general. I'm not. People obviously have referred to you as isolationist. I'm not trying.
Yeah,
to...
I think it's an insane label. It's like
I'm not trying to
racist from the left has become the new isolationist
totally
from the right.
You're
exactly. Yeah.
No, but it does. But it is a concept and a fair one. As it relates to Israel. So, like, for example, you have a group like Hamas, which isn't just committed to the annihilation of Israelis, but Jews worldwide, as they say it. So, does it fit within a government like the American people, who has Jews as part of its citizenry, to view that threat as domestic in a way? Because
the irony is we're not. Right now, we've got 12 million people that will have crossed the southern border under Joe Biden's regime that we're actually failing to protect our homeland. And my top concern is, if what happened on October 7th can happen in Israel, that can absolutely happen right here in the United States of America. And I think we're at greater risk than we've been at any point in the last 20 years for that to happen right now in the United States. And I think we have leadership that's asleep at the switch, frankly, in both parties. So yes, that absolutely is a concern. I think that can't be used as just a vehicle to say, okay, so we're just going to, use that as our justification to do something whose motivation is something else. If that was really our motivation, and I think it should be, we have a major issue of mass deportations we need to effectuate in this country now. And for my part, I favor those mass deportations. And I say that as the kid of legal immigrants to this country. We're a country founded on the rule of law. And if your first act of entering this country, by definition, broke the law, then you're more likely to break the law when you're already here. And we're seeing that in the crime wave across this country. A young woman who went jogging, who ended up killed as younger than any of us in this room. Crazy. Just in the last week, is just one sad example among hopefully not far worse to come. But we have to step up and absolutely awaken ourselves to that risk. But that should be the North Star of the United States, is to ask ourselves how we advance the interests of American citizens right here. Now, there's a long run. That's not just the short run. It's not just our short run interest tomorrow. That means we have alliances, means we have relationships. Why does the alliance with Israel matter? I mean, very practically right now for the U.S., it's more important than it's been for much of the last 40 years. As you look at the U.S. needing to focus on an emerging threat posed by China, I mean, that's a real issue where we need to, even before what happened on October 7th, a lot of the U.S. military resources were being refocused to the South China Sea and to the Pacific theater. It's all the more important to have a rock-solid, reliable, long-run partner in the Middle East, right? So that relationship is critical. But then the question is just, okay, what's the mechanism of that relationship? I think it's cheap, and I think it's lazy, and I think it is actually more than lazy, arguably even counterproductive to say, oh, well, there's a war happening there, just 14 billion here, done, and then we've done our part, but then we also have to second guess decisions that are made because, well, we gave them the money, versus look at it from the standpoint of the ally. What's really limiting their ability to achieve their own self-stated war objectives? I think there's a few things. One is as a friend, not as a parent or a boss, but as a friend, I would say, define for our own experience would teach, define for yourself what exactly are your war objectives. We made a mistake going into places like Iraq where we didn't have clearly defined war objectives, and that was worse for the United States in the end as a result. So just as a friend, make sure you define your war objectives. But once you've done that, as a friend, it is my view to you, say president to president, if I was president talking to Bibi or whatever, you have the latitude to do what you need to do to preserve Israel's national boundaries and national right to exist. You have the right and the obligation to do it. And our job as a partner is to make sure that the UN or the US or the EU or nobody else gets in your way. And I think that's actually a more honest and more useful solution. And I think you could pick and choose, but I think a lot of the most strong pro-Israel voices in Israel have actually arrived at a similar conclusion.
Actually want to wean off of American aid as well.
Well, but you could talk about long-run self-sustenance, but even in the context of this war, the thing they need right now is diplomatic latitude.
Yeah, I wanted to ask.
And by the way, just for the record, because I've learned about how politics works and people misrepresent this conversation. I have always been clear. I know, not you, but I know how the mainstream media operates. Even
they'll watch this podcast.
They'll watch this podcast and then exactly. historical commitments you have to stand by. I mean, you can't be somebody who makes a commitment and then just abandons those commitments. So the historical non-war specific, not specific war specific aid, I've always said, stand by that. But for new elective foreign aid, not just Israel or anybody else, we have to look through the prism of what advances American interest. Right. In this case, neither American nor Israeli interest is this half in, half out attitude.
Yeah, so I have two questions, but the first one still relates to Israel specifically. First of all, I'm curious regarding the West Bank and so-called, the occupied territories, what your opinion would be on settlements. But specifically, you talk about the diplomatic latitude given to Israel. There's definitely a strong angle to be said that in order to root out Hamas, and I'm not suggesting this, I don't know enough to give an opinion, to say that clear. But there could be a strong take to be made that in order to root out Hamas, you do need to occupy Gaza and really have a stronghold there there's going to be pockets. If they just walk out of there in 4 months or in 3 months, there's going to be more, right, to really change that and to protect Israel. I could see definitely people in Israel that are, would feel that way. Like they can't have this happen again. And, it's the worst day ever. I mean, what would you say? Does that give, because that's against international law as an example.
Well, is it? I mean, we can debate that.
The West Bank is officially,
So I think that these are decisions of self-determination for Israel to make. Now, I can have opinions on them. They may be, more informed than the average Americans. They will be more informed than the average Americans, but less informed than somebody who's at the front lines of having made this their own objective of looking after Israel's security from Israel, because that's their job to carry out. So I think it's really important for us not to wear the hat, somebody who's recently running for president of the United States, to just offer some sort of monarchical judgment about what Israel should or shouldn't do.
It's easy to tell other people how to live.
Exactly. It's sort of armchair, that kind of. I have some. In the conversation, if this was a conversation between me and Bibi and we're talking amongst friends and he's asking for my opinion, I would offer it. But that would be the context in which I offer that opinion, not some type of armchair. This is a decision for Israel's self-determination. Now, if you want to put in the category of armchair opinions, it's interesting to make an observation that for the, hundreds of millions or 100 million or whatever sons of Abraham by way of Ishmael, you have 22, 27 different states.
Yeah.
For the sons of Abraham by way of Isaac, you have one.
Right.
And that state has a right to exist. And that state has a right to exist. And so if the rest of the Arab world does have a real care about the Palestinian people, their actions certainly do not match their words.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting observation that any human being around the world can make. That
the place most human beings are not making that observation, unfortunately.
I think it is, but I think it's a fact, right? We're talking about truth, and the place on earth, arguably, or at least one of the handful of places on earth where the Palestinian people live the highest quality of life with the broadest civic latitude is in Israel, where I believe what you call the Palestinian percentage of the Israel population is greater than the Black or Hispanic population in the United States of America. So it would seem bizarre to say that Israel is guilty of genocide, the elimination of a race, when the place on earth that race lives the best possible life that they're known to anywhere on earth is in the very state that's committing genocide against them at a higher ratio than either the Black or Hispanic population in the U.S. So I'm deeply sympathetic on many of these counts, but there's a lot of complexity here. And I think our job as U.S. leaders is to say that Israel is our ally for self-interested reasons. Among those that I gave you, the U.S. needs far more focus on deterring Chinese aggression and everything else, that we need a reliable, standing partner in the Middle East. We have historical commitments that we're going to stand by. But on a go-forward basis, let's help our ally in a way that also helps ourselves diplomatically, which is what they need and which is what we can give without actually incurring great cost ourselves, not just financial cost, but even risk. That's better for Israel and better for us. And so that's a little different than the standard Republican talking points, but I think is actually the principled conservative America first and I believe Israel-friendly answer.
Yeah. So they just announced, 3,000 more units, settlements after this past terrorist attack in the West Bank. What would be your response to that? Too provoking? Israel having the right? What would be your opinion?
To respond to the additional settlements in the West Bank.
Yeah, they just, Bibi announced after this last terrorist attack, there was another one like a week ago. And he announced the next day, he's like, we're building another 3,000 units. I guess as a punishment, I mean, it seems pretty clear, sort of how we'll demolish a home.
Look, I think that the fact that that's in the West Bank and in responses, you could have my opinion about whether or not, if you really view that as a separate issue, then why is the proximity in relation to what's happening right now? And I'm sure that there's plenty of voices in Israel debating that question as well. My question is, from the U.S.'s perspective as an ally, the boundaries are what does and doesn't comport with international law. And if it comports with international law, it's Israel's self-determination. If it doesn't comport with international law, then it's our responsibility with an ally to make sure that our allies, like ourselves, are compliant with international law.
It's similar to like a personal, almost in a personal relationship. Like if you have a close friend, but he's doing something egregiously wrong, you have to confirm that friend
if your friend is committing illegal behavior that subjects him to the consequence of that illegal behavior, a good friend doesn't let his friend, I would say, drive on the wrong side of the road while drunk or whatever. That's what good friends do. But on the other hand, if your friend wants to, date a girl that you don't like, you can give him your opinion, but it's his right to live his life.
All right, everybody, want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for this episode, Ice Shaker Incorporated. For those of you that have been following Mislabeled, you know that we had Chris Gronkowski on. This is his company. They were on Shark Tank, offered a deal by all 5 sharks. They have sold over 1 million bottles to date. Kitchen grade stainless steel, which does not absorb odor like all plastic bottles do. If you are a workout junkie, this product is for you. Third-party tested, will hold ice for 30 plus hours and keep your drink cold. Additionally, this is customizable for all employers for their employees and can make for a great gift for a friend. Turnaround time on custom bottles is 3 to 5 business days. To reach out to them, you can hit them via email, info@iceshaker.com. That's info@iceshaker.com. Or reach them by phone, 817-329-6478. Again, that's 817-329-6478. A customer rep will direct you to the correct sales department. Now back to our episode.
You've spoken about how America as a society is has an identity crisis as well right now. And one of the things you pointed to is the rise of secular religions.
Yes.
To a layman, to an idiot, can you describe what exactly is a secular religion? How does it affect our society?
Yeah, so secular religions, and we can name ones that fit this description.
Please.
Wokeism, transgenderism. I put climate ideology, what I call climatism, in this category. I put COVIDism in this category. It became a kind of religion. Is a religion without a God. So it has a hierarchical set of comprehensive beliefs that guide how you're supposed to behave in pursuit of a kind of salvation, but without an actual God to provide that salvation.
Absolute truth.
Without that absolute truth governing.
Okay.
Right? And so in the woke ideology, there's a comprehensive worldview. It says that you're in my relationship with each other, that we're in a relationship with each other. It's guided not by the salt and the salt water that God resides in each of us. It's a different kind of relationship. It's a relationship of hierarchy, which says that one of us is an oppressor and one of us is oppressed based on a category of math of intersectionality that creates this world ordering of hierarchies based on power relationships. And the Marxist old worldview, and Marxism was very hostile to traditional religion because it had a religious quality of its own. The Marxist worldview, that power relationship was based on money. In the new wokeism worldview, it's based on genetic immutable characteristics, to say that the world is governed by not by the invisible presence of God within each of us, but by invisible struggles of power relationships between each of us. And then once you understand that power relationship, that guides what you are or aren't supposed to do. The moral thing to do if you are in a position of being in the oppressor position is to make the sacrifice, the equivalent of like an old Catholic tradition of wearing a hair shirt or whatever. You actually have to make a physical sacrifice unto yourself to be able to stand back to let the person who's lower on that rung of hierarchy to have the same equal opportunity that you do. In the climate religion, to say that we are facing an existential risk, that you personally have to make a sacrifice to advance the betterment of the whole. Again, the equivalent of wearing a hair shirt. Every religion, in many ways, has this culture of sacrifice before God, before one true God. I mean, even in the Hindu tradition, there's various examples of it. You'd go to India, you would see all kinds of strange ritual sacrifices where people will walk on hot coals or fire. You've seen it in the Catholic tradition.
Have you done that?
No.
Okay.
I'm not a big.
No, I've heard of it, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm not a big. That's not my brand.
Right.
I'm just like, most Catholics don't wear a hair shirt, right? Or flog themselves.
And I don't have horns, but other Orthodox. No. Okay.
So what would be the best example of like a sacrificial tradition in the Jewish tradition?
Well, we did originally, like in the times of the temple, we were very sacrifice based.
Right. What would be a good example? Like animals mostly. Animals.
Yeah, it was mostly like
never,
rams.
never human beings. That's
I guess the most iconic example would be like on on Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the year.
Yeah.
In the times of the temple, they would have 2 goats.
Okay.
And one would be thrown off a cliff,
Right.
to like represent like what should be happening to us for our sins, and then one would be sacrificed to God. Like,
And
on
you've,
the
I
altar.
suppose, never done that.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anyone's done it in 3,000 years.
So,
Someone did do it in
someone
Israel
did do it.
2,500 years ago.
So anyway, but my point is, most traditional religions have this, at least built into the cultural backdrop or history of it, this idea of sacrifice. You see that actually popping up in the new secular religions of the sacrifice you're supposed to make if you're higher on the totem pole of intersectionality.
Like
or
that guy
the temple
who just burnt himself alive for
Totally.
Yeah. Right.
There's a new secular religion of its own.
That was like the new. Oh, that's crazy.
In the COVID ideology, it's the same thing. I mean, that's what in the later phase of the pandemic, wearing a mask ended up becoming was a symbol of the sacrifice that you're making for that broader whole. And so it has all of the characteristics of a religious way of being, but without the actual God.
Interesting.
That
So
anchors
interesting
the
you're using that
religion
example
itself.
because at a certain point, it kind of became like accepted that masks don't really do anything.
Right.
Yet it was like a virtue signaling, like I am on this side of the
Yeah,
COVID debate.
I mean, it took the quality. I mean, we're just having a free flowing conversation right now. We're all talking. I mean, it had the quality of you wearing a yarmulke here. You
Right.
wearing a yarmulke here signals to me that you're Jewish.
I have an extra one if you want, by the way.
I'll take it for the rest of the discussion if you want. Cover my bald spot back here, so we can. So we probably if it's really jet black, that could actually come in handy for me.
I also have a baseball hat with an Israeli flag on it. That might be a little harder.
But no, I mean, look, I wear my American flag as the only flag hat that I usually wear. But my point is, when you ask about secular religions, it ends up in a religion grounded in a firm conviction and belief in God. There are ways we still express that in the way we live our lives or the symbols that we use.
Right.
And so the irony with the secular religions, you have people subscribing to these belief systems that explicitly almost reject their God-like or their God-related beliefs, yet are behaving in a manner that's otherwise entirely consistent with a rather traditional conservative organized religion.
What's an example of that?
Well, I mean, I'll give you the mask. You wear the mask because you feel like that's your religious obligation to.
Right.
You count your carbon emissions and you
Right.
limit the way you're using an
they're
airplane
using
or a
that
car or a
behaving
gas
in-
stove.
okay.
That has the quality of a religious conviction, right? That Greta Thunberg. Why do people follow her? She's like a modern Joan of Arc figure that fills that void of purpose that people need to follow somebody who gives them a limitation of what they can and can't do.
I always say it's actually very interesting. The belief in God, like you were saying that there's a identity crisis. I was thinking that the belief in God is very simply, it governs so strongly one's life. Like when it comes to transgenderism or all sorts of political issues, if you think about it, if there's no God and there's no bigger purpose, then why can't I be whatever I want to be? Like you're here for 80 years, you're done. There's no actual thing that's governing any bigger picture. So like I decide I want to be a woman tomorrow. Well,
and I'm not even making it as a negative judgment. I think it has the quality of. So what does that mean? When people start behaving in those ways that have religious conviction, it says to me that we as human beings, as I alluded to, unlike animals, have a hardwired need to believe in something bigger than ourselves. Right. That's what's behind the story of the golden calf. Really,
that's why atheists are notoriously depressed, I guess.
I think so. I think that's a big part of it. Or atheists may actually correlate with still creating a capital A atheism that becomes a religious conviction in the absence of a God.
It itself is its own religion.
Which then in turn becomes its own religion. And so it's not a coincidence that we see the recession of religion or faith or patriotism at the exact same time that we see the rise of these new secular religions of wokeism or transgenderism or
It's
climatism.
just so interesting because these kind of secular religions, which you're referring to, were kind of in the pursuit of equality. And it's almost backwards now because like the saltwater example, which you gave, is in the essence of equality. God is in all of us. And their religion is dependent on this hierarchy, which is which is unequal.
Exactly. And I think that's where the Hindu foundation that I was raised in and the Judeo-Christian values that this nation was founded on intersect, which is in the fundamental equality of man is rooted not just in a piece of paper, a political document, but is rooted in foundational principles given to us by God, actually.
Yeah, I heard that.
Equality comes from the fact
Let me
that we're
ask.
made.
I got it. So another important thing we were talking about before is how you could say something that you don't mean on this podcast, and that could be taken and should be taken in a certain way, and the media will go and take that sentence, which is clearly meant to be one thing, and take it and put it in a totally different context.
And especially I've noticed one thing that's kind of just fascinating is in the era of these longer form podcasts, which I think are great, you still have the legacy corporate media that operates according to 2 seconds or 2 minute sound bites.
Cut it.
And so the world in which those two worlds collide is actually the highest risk format of that, right? So that's why a lot of politicians
What do you mean? Explain that.
Well, so I'm here. Everything that I've said in our conversation came in the context of something that has a 40-minute or whatever, however long we're talking, context around it. And yet, CNN or whatever operates according to 2 minute snippets. And so lifting something out of this and putting on CNN, right, not even consecutive, is almost a budding of two worlds that increases the risk of that misinterpretation, which is why many national politicians don't go on long-form podcasts like this.
It's fascinating.
Right? Because it's created an incentive structure to say that you're going to be penalized for doing it. Now, I think over the long run, we're going to reach more people this way. I think we're also going to reach more people with a higher quality conversation this way.
Yeah.
Because real life is more complicated than a 2 minute discussion, and we can't have a philosophical or religious exploration like we did at the start of this conversation on a CNN or an MSNBC or cable news. And so I think that's good anyway. But that is a funny thing right now, is that when we live in a world with new media via podcasts, still where legacy media plays, unfortunately, an important role in American politics, the budding up of those is actually what increases the risk of that out of context.
It gets even worse where they'll put a quote. So like the quote will be a sentence, and it's you watch it and you're like, all right, like, yeah, okay. But like,
can I tell you one example of that? So I did an interview on MSNBC. I wish I had read the article that he was quoting beforehand. So he quoted in this article where somebody was saying something about me. I forget what the exact quote was, but something that sounded negative about me. All right. And he said, this is your own former colleague that has said this about you. And I'm hearing this on air at the first time.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, that doesn't sound like something that my colleague would have said, but I haven't read the article that was published in the Financial Times.
He's trying to catch
so he's just like, okay. So after the interview's over, right? So then that was kind of a gotcha that he kind of ambushed with me. After the article, I'm like, no, my friend, come on, man. I've worked together for years. Like, did he really say that? I can't believe this guy said that on TV, but I mean, he's reading a quote. Literally the next line, I kid you not, you can look it up in the Financial Times. The quote after this is, from my friend, is, now I know, Financial Times published this. Now, don't you dare take this out of context, because I think that everyone has done exactly what Vivek has. Literally was the exact next sentence. And yet on air, the guy literally reads that first sentence.
Getting to my question.
It was laughable.
You're getting to my question. Yeah. The media clearly is out. When they want to get you, they will come at you.
Yeah.
I mean, we see what's going on with Trump. They will do everything and anything to keep him out. That's just so clear. And when they want you, they're coming after you. Is there some way to curb that and put into effect? I feel like there has to be more consequences for the media for just like...
Yes, this is a tough one.
Free speech, but...
Yeah. I mean, I'm a free speech absolutist.
Same.
And so I think the only thing worse than this type of corporatized, centralized, dogmatic media is a government directing what that media can and can't say. So you know what the right answer is? More competition. I think, first of all, the modern internet has provided an escape valve, and that's why internet censorship is actually the most dangerous of all, right? Because the check on CNN is X or the internet or whatever, podcasts or YouTube even. YouTube can be censored. Rumble's in a check on YouTube. That competition, I think, is actually the last best check we have, which is why I'm an especially staunch supporter of internet freedom. And what you're seeing right now happen in the last few years is the government is threatening those internet companies to do through the back door, to censor the speech through the back door. The government couldn't censor through the front door, and having the internet companies do it. That's actually the most dangerous thing, which is why I've made that a pet issue of mine, to say if the government is threatening a tech company, Google, Facebook, whatever, to say that you can't allow that speech, but the government couldn't do it directly, that itself is a constitutional violation. That's a whole legal... interesting kettle of fish that we could probably fry another day. But I've written books, I've written articles about this, and I think that that's actually one of the dangerous forms of censorship of our time.
Got it.
Can I ask you just to shift gears a little bit, because we're wrapping a little bit? Like a personal question. I was wondering. I was talking about this to him on the way here. You obviously appeal to young voters, and like you're a nationally ranked tennis player. This young, cool vibe to you. On the other hand, you were part of all these like sophisticated, like intellectual.
Were you getting chicks when you were like?
Were you cool?
Where was that?
When you were in
high school?
Yeah. High school.
I was like siloed away. I went to all boys high school, very traditional
like us.
background. Yeah, you did. Yeah. And then college, that probably changed.
Yeah,
a lot of pent up
so you did
energy.
well for yourself in college?
I would say through my 20s.
It's important. It's important to know for someone who.
I didn't do badly. Yeah, I'd say.
So when did Vivek
but I'm very happy with where things have landed. In a
yeah,
stable
that's my question. When did
marriage.
Vivek get like cool? When did you just get dope like that? You're rolling with like the times.
I've always been a guy who follows my passions, and so at times that's had me be a really nerdy dude, and at times it's had me perceived as being cool. But whatever my passions are, I really get pretty deep into them. Yeah, I'm into the things I pursue: tennis, music.
Right. You work out a lot.
Today, it was like that's how I get my thoughts flowing too, actually. And so I kind of my best workouts. My trainer got sick today. That's like a tight 1 hour workout, but it ended up being like a 2.5 hour thinking workout session. I went and recorded some videos in the middle of the workout. Went back out. Had some people come over. Got a little bit of work done. So I'm a guy who likes to follow what my actual native gut instinct and energy tells me to pursue. And you know what? Sometimes, more often than not, that's led me to good results. But I've actually been better at achieving great results when I'm doing that rather than solving for a specific result and working backwards. In many cases, you don't get to that result that way. And so I'm approaching this next phase of my life too, and we'll see where it takes me.
Yeah. So a couple last things. You started from when you grew up, right? You started from basically zero. I mean, you built 5 companies, right? Whatever. You're a billionaire. You've done it all. Could you give some quick tips? There's a lot of kids watching here.
Yeah.
Younger guys watching. Right. They've also come from nothing. I came from nothing.
I went
at nothing.
I went to law school and
you went to law school. Nice.
I went to law school and like everyone else, I was accruing debt. And then I read that you went to law school with $15 million. I was like, wait, what did I miss?
Well, I went to law school with very little, but I had gotten a good job heading in that I kept, and then I made that during law school. So
yes.
My question is, what is the recipe if you had to tell a random person? I know it's a generic question, but what has worked for you? You're not just someone who.
One is don't apologize for your success. Okay. I think that's the first thing I would say. Is we live in a cultural moment where you're taught to kind of have this false modesty. Don't be braggadocious for the sake of being braggadocious, but don't be fake humble for the sake of being humble either.
I told you this always.
right? So just own it, right? If you're successful at something, it's awesome.
Well, I told you got chicks and you didn't believe it. So.
Right? So and it probably works for that too. Just be yourself, okay? The thing I would say is sometimes we fall into the trap. I was talking about this earlier this morning of defining ourselves based on what we do. And instead, who you are is different than what you do. So figure out who you are, and then what you do follows from that, okay? And so you may think, okay, I'm a lawyer or I'm a politician, and that's who I am. No. Who you are is something that's far before that. And then what you do is a consequence of who you are, how you want to have an impact. And that means at different stages of your life, you might do different things. And I think that's okay. And so very practical advice I'd give to young people is like in their, let's say young people, this is advice for people in their 20s. This does not apply to people in their 30s or 40s, I think. But it applies to people in their 20s is think of your life in 2 to 3 year chapters. And I think that gives you a lot of freedom, actually, because that means that the decision you make has no binding consequence for the 2 to 3 years after that, right? And so if you view your 20s that way in like 2 to 3 year increments, I can't make it 2 to 3 month increments. That's too short because then you can't really you can't really experience the essence.
It does
of what
take
it
the
is.
anxiety away.
Yeah, but it sort of takes it like a process. I sort of tell people the same thing with respect to trying ideas, but I think in this case I'll say it with respect to trying a career. Try it on like a set of clothes, right? See if it fits, and if it fits, you can make it a permanent purchase decision. But if it doesn't quite fit for some reason or other, you can put it back on the rack. But you'll be more likely to find what does fit in the end. So you could think of your ideas that way, right? So if you go to college campuses, how do you talk to people who might have seemingly crazy beliefs or whatever? Just give people the permission. Say, take what I'm going to tell you, try it on like a set of clothes. If not, put it back on the rack. And then view your career over your first few years in the same way too. 2 to 3 years, try it on, see if it fits. If not, worst case, you got an interesting experience out of it.
Yeah.
But you discovered something more about yourself. Because you're not defined by what you do, but what you do can help you discover yourself at the same time. That'd be the advice I would give.
Last thing, when it comes to, I think right now everyone would agree, the country is extremely divided. If there's one thing everyone talks about, we need a someone who can unify the country.
Yeah.
I'm of the belief, and tell me if you agree, that a commander-in-chief that could unify has to have, it's not a policy-based thing, it's a intangible-based ability to understand human beings and a wisdom that takes to lead.
I agree with you, it's not
specific
policy.
thing.
I agree with you, it's not policy. And that's a profound insight, but I think it's true.
Yeah, I'm a very smart dude. I own it. Okay, here's my question to you.
He's a very modest guy also.
Do you believe... Listen, I'm sitting in Vivek's house right now, all right? Shut up. All right. No, real talk. Do you believe... God willing, I hope to see you in 2020. I hope you get the VP. Like, first of all, you're taking that thing, right? You're taking that if they give that to you, correct?
Whatever's required for the country, I'm going to do it. And this goes back to the whole thing. It's about planning and plotting my life. I'm going to do what's required for my sense of purpose right now, which is having an impact on this country and reviving this country.
I got it. I'm asking
whatever's required, I'm going to do it.
What do you think is the intangible? Is there a way to put your finger on it and what's necessary?
Yes, I think, actually. I think that talking about national unity is itself a step in the right direction. Actually, It shows that it's something that's worth preserving, that we actually care about it. I also think, and this is one of the optimistic learnings I had from the last year in the campaign, I know the myth is, or the narrative is, that we're divided. I don't actually think we are. Not nearly as divided as we think.
That's shocking.
I think 80% of this country, put the media filters and everything to one side, the appearance of division is different than actual division. I think 80% of this country actually shares the same foundational value set in common, that believes there is a one true God, higher, that resides in each of us, or that we're made in the image of and therefore we're equal. 80% of this population who agrees that you get to say whatever you want as long as I get to in return.
Right.
That you should be able to achieve whatever you want, regardless of your skin color or your gender or your sexual orientation or your religion. I think 80% of this country agrees on those foundational ideals. And then what about the remaining 20%? Half those 20% are the people chanting infitata, right? The people who never learned those ideals in the first place. That's not even their fault.
That's right, for neo-Nazis.
That's the fault of the society that has failed to instill that level of civic virtue and purpose in that next generation. We can bring half them along too. And so that's why I think in this moment, the task of unifying this country, it's always daunting, but it's not as daunting as we make it out to be if we have leaders who are willing to actually speak the truth, speak it without apology, speak it with respect.
Right.
But part of respect is that you respect your neighbor enough to tell him what you actually think. And I'm going to do whatever I can, whatever small role I can play, small or large, to help reunite this country. I care a lot about that. And I actually believe Donald Trump is going to surprise a lot of people in his second term.
By picking you as VP?
When he reunites his country. When he reunites his country.
He offered you the job. Tell me, Vivek. I want to be the one to break it.
We're gonna do whatever's required for the country, and I'll be respectful of my conversations with him, and I'm not going to. But I think we got to fall out of this trap, all of us, out of this trap of thinking there's some sort of like hierarchy, right? That okay, I mean, President of the United States is certainly the most impactful role for having an impact on the country. But there's many ways to change a country, within the government, outside the government. And I think it's up to each of us to look ourselves in the mirror and say, what's our purpose? Why do I believe God put me here? What are the unique skills that God gave me? Every one of us has our own unique God-given talents. Find it, understand it deeply, be honest with yourself about what those are, and then act out your obligation, which is to use those God-given gifts to do what is right in the short time that we're given.
Vivek, thank you so much. I'm very honored. This is a special hour for me, so thank you. I appreciate you giving us the time.
I called my mom on the way here. I'm like, pray for me. I swear, I said that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, guys.
She's praying for both of us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you for watching. Another great episode coming next week. Peace and love. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.